channel, as well as our website where you can visit and download the recording. So without further ado, I would like to invite Nicola to come and join us. Nicola, please, would you like to come through?
Hello, Dina. Thank you very
Hi,
much.
hi.
Hi.
You're very welcome. I will pass this over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I would like to share my screen with you. So here we go. Okay, as Dina has said, we are talking today about the effect on line management. We're all line managers. Everyone has a line manager. So it's all about what do we need to do, first of all, to support ourselves moving forward and support others. So where have we come from? We've come an awful long way in a very short time. So today I'd like to share some of the experiences, some coaching techniques. You don't have to be a coach to use them, but they're very, very useful as a line manager. Maybe you've got to give some difficult messages out to people. So I'm going to help you with that and give you some tips and tools. And then what's the future? Where are we going next? Because again, that is uncertain, nervous territory for all of us. So my name is Nicola Wise, as Adina's already said. I have 35 years plus probably experience of training, facilitating. I'm an international business coach. I'm a business owner, and I have managed teams many times of differing sizes. So I'm hoping to bring that experience with me today and share that with you, share some stories about who I've been working with and who am I working with now. And hopefully at the end of this, I'll be able to give you some takeaways that you can use that will be practical tips for going forward for whatever life hits you with next time. But let's find out just for a moment where we are at the moment, because I think this is important for us to identify who's out there and what you're thinking. So let's have a look at the first poll that we've got today. Since COVID-19 became an issue in your country, whether it's the end of last year or earlier this year, how many of you continued to work either at home or in your normal workplace, are furloughed or supported financially by your government and at home, have been laid off temporarily with a rough timeline to return to work, are out of work now or have a small business or maybe self-employed with an unknown future and no income? And how many of you already started getting back to work? Okay, that's very interesting. So we've got a big percentage there, majority of continuing to work either at home or in your normal workplace. So a lot of what I've got to say to you today is very relevant because it's all about that's going to be changing again. Many of you are also furloughed. Some of you are probably doing little bits of work just to see what's going on and not necessarily anything major, but you just don't want to get completely out of the loop. And then we do have somebody there at 8% who are saying that they have a small business or they're self-employed, their future is totally unknown. And we're going to come back to, we've got several polls today to find out where we're getting to. So thank you very much for that. So the line manager now, where are we? Where are we at? I think what we need to look at is that we have, up until recently, until this started, got ourselves in sort of a rut. We've been routine, we have got procedures and processes, and I liken it to the man on the hamster wheel. If you've ever seen the hamster going round and round, you may have one at home. And this was us, most of us, line managers and staff, going round and round in our everyday work, getting up in the morning, same routine, same things to do, hitting our targets, doing our work, inwardly focused most of the time on us and what we were doing. And to some extent, we were also thinking to ourselves, well, I don't need to help other people, that's their job. I don't need to get on and go and help them because I am focusing on what my job is. And this cartoon shows very nicely about, I'm sure glad the hole isn't at our end. Many organisations, different departments were not in sync with each other. And then along comes this scary thing where we are all of a sudden told to work from home. Some people still have to go into work. So we've got health and care workers, we've got key workers, we've got people out there working in some factories and manufacturing, because obviously we still need to get those things done. But it's been a massive worldwide shock, I think that's the best word. And we weren't expecting it. And it's really what they call the black swan theory, where something comes along, sudden, has a massive impact. We had no idea it was coming or being this big. And now we're starting to settle into it, and we realise that maybe it's been there all along, or something very similar has. So where are we now? Well, I would like to share with you my thoughts. You'll all recognise this as a ball of wool. Whether you use them or not, I'm not sure. But basically this tells us that life was very neatly wrapped up before, and it's got a label on it. We knew what we were doing. We knew where we were going. As line managers, we were producing balls of wool and getting it all neat and tidy. Now, we've got to remember that they come in different colours, different sizes, but ultimately that's what the ball of wool is all about. It's about us. It's about knowing what we're doing, what we're getting for our money, and what the output is going to be. But then you think to yourself, what happened earlier this year? Well, I'll tell you what happened. All of a sudden, the ball of wool was dropped. And what did we end up with? Well, we ended up with this. And this has become our future, our present and our future. And if you think about what I said just now, where everything was fine, the quality is still there. Same colour, same content, same output. We can still do what we used to do with it, but the way that we pick that up as line managers and get together with our staff and enable them to put something together that we want to work with going forward, everybody's going to do that in a slightly different way. I don't think there's that many people, certainly not looking at it from my past experience, that everything's going to go back to how it was. It's probably not going to, for many people, look like this again. So the analogy is, you know, we're in this mess. However, it is retrievable, and it gives us the opportunity to take a different approach and do something a lot more exciting with it. Now, I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the Kubler-Ross reaction curve. I think this is a great example of what's happened to us and what's happening to our people. As managers, we have to sort ourselves out so we can help others. And the curve is there now, it's happened, it's going to keep happening. So from my own perspective, I have to say that when this happened and I was suddenly going to be stuck at home, and all my training and coaching that I would normally do face to face, my meetings I would just normally go to, wouldn't even think about it, jump in the car, get on the train, stops. So the first thing is we're still at the top, because I carry on thinking, right, well, I should still be doing this, and I carry on designing my courses and whatever it is I have to do. But I'm kind of in denial. I might be a little bit angry about it, or frustrated, or a bit confused, because it's never happened before. It's really weird. Then what I'm doing is resisting it and thinking, well, there must be ways around it. I must be able to do something else with it. And I start to resist it, but actually I realise that it's far bigger than me. So I talk to my staff, we try and work out what the heck's going on, and we get down, some of us, into that bottom, which is called the dip of depression, unfortunately. And to varying degrees, people start to think, okay, well, how are we going to get through this? And we start to explore new ways of moving forward. We've been through this. We've come so far in a very short space of time. So along the bottom, you can see where it says time. That is different timeline for everybody, absolutely different. And now we've got to the situation where we have committed to certain ways of working. Some of you will be sitting at home quite happily getting on with doing your work. 67% of you said that you're still carrying on doing things, but you're also having to juggle with family maybe, or other housemates that you are in lockdown with or have been. Now what's going to happen is the announcement, certainly from the UK government last week and many other countries, starting to go back to work. We're going to be going through this curve again because we are uncertain about what it's actually going to mean to us. They are fixing stuff at work. They are putting down lines for anything between 1 and 2 meters to stay apart. They are doing all of the things they need to do, washrooms, kitchens, the things that we took for granted. But that's only operationally. Our job now as line managers, your job, is to start thinking about the emotional effect on people. And even though we're ready to go back in a physical state, are people emotionally ready to go back? I don't know. I don't think some people are. I think that they've got themselves into another cozy little, maybe man on the wheel rut, and we're going to have to change that again. So be aware as a line manager what you're looking out for in yourself and your staff. Be aware that everybody's going to go through this at different paces and different kinds of emotions. There are sort of 8 key emotions, really, that we tend to go through at different times, sometimes really quickly and sometimes they're spread out. Obviously, anger is the one that a lot of people were very angry about what had happened. Where had this virus come from? Why is it coming here? Why is it disturbing my life? They might be angry. You might be angry about the government, the way they're handling it. You might be angry about your organisation. There's not necessarily any particular reason why we go through some of these emotions. Joy is a great one. Some of us have discovered that it's quite joyous at times not to have to travel so much. Sit in airports, sit in the traffic jams, sit on that train. And actually it's quite nice to be able to get up in the morning and organise your own day and get on and do whatever you want to do. The joy of spending more time with your family, which, you know, normally if you've got a family, you probably don't see them that much. Anticipation, that's the what happens next. What is actually going to be happening? We're not really sure about that. As a line manager, trust has got to be the crucial word there. That's the crucial emotion. We have to be able to trust our staff and they have to be able to trust us, because we're never going to get through this together and build a really strong, committed team if we don't have that. Fear of the unknown, as you know, is massive. So we have to be as clear as possible with people. And later on, we're talking about having difficult conversations. So we have to understand that people are going to be fearful about what's the conversation, what's coming up, how am I going to deal with it? Disgust is a great one. Excuse me. Disgust at what's happened, the way it's being handled, what's going on in the world. Sadness, because it is very sad what is happening to people. All of us have been touched by sadness at some point and still are and still will be, unfortunately. And it's how we handle that and how you handle that with your staff. And of course, surprise. How many of you have been surprised at yourselves, how you've managed, how you've coped, how you've dealt with situations? How many of you are so surprised at what other people have done that you may never have seen that side of them before? Things, it could be in your family, could be friends, could be colleagues, could be people within your team. And that's really important to think about. I'm going to tell you a story about a lady that I've been coaching for a couple of years now, who is the financial director of quite a large organisation. And she was taking on extra teams. So they had a reshuffle. She was not only looking after the accounts, the financial side, she also had to look after anything to do with facilities and management and potentially moving offices within central London. She was also in charge of the marketing team. They were bringing all this together. So we were doing some coaching on how she was going to be able to manage that situation. She was going into her office every day. So the rest of stuff was the same. When this came along and they were all told to stay at home, that was a whole different conversation, because she had to then stop and think about how did she feel about it. She was scared. She didn't want to go out. She didn't feel like she could go out anywhere because she's got an elderly mother and she didn't want to sort of bring any germs home. And I think, she went through all of these different emotions. And then what happened was she had to help her staff through the same thing. And I'm going to come back to this lady a little bit later on, because her journey and her story is probably very similar to yours and the line management challenges that you have ahead of you. So let's have a look at our next poll and find out what's going on. So how many of you have got a clear understanding of what's expected of you back in the workplace when you go back? How many of you think you know, but you need confirmation? How many really have no idea at all at this time? And how many of you are worried about the future and lack of communication from your organisation? Oh, okay. I think that's good. That's most of you, 58% of you are saying you think you know, but you need confirmation. So we're going back to that thing about making assumptions. We think we know what's happening, but not really sure. 25% of you have a clear understanding. That is brilliant. I mean, that's very, very good. And the 17%, interesting, really have no idea at this time. Okay, again, as line managers, we need to be saying to ourselves, what can I do to find out for myself and for other people? So when you think you know, you need to sit down and say, right, how do I find out? Who do I need to speak to? What support do I need? If you really have no idea at all, again, same thing. Who can I ask? Who's there to help me? Don't forget, we've all got line managers. We've all got teams. We need to find other people around. And those that have said have a clear understanding of what's expected, that's great, because you have that stability in some way, being able to now say, okay, I can start to plan for the future. But remember that if you asked your team these very questions, how would they answer? Okay, thank you. So this is an expectation and reality. What did we expect when all this happened? It seemed quite clear. What do we expect now? So as a manager of a team of people, what are you expecting? What are you expected to do, actually, because it's a two-way thing? And what's the reality? Well, I expect to go back, get on the train, go back to work. My organisation will have everything organised. I can just get on with what I was doing before, but it needs to be 2 metres apart. The reality of that is very, very different. There are lots of little hurdles and twists and turns along the way that I need to stop to sit down and start thinking about. The emotional impact. So what is your role now as a line manager? Because it's very different to what it used to be. You can't just sit down and have meetings with people again and have a quick chat and get together. You kind of got to approach it in a very different way. And it's like climbing your mountain. You may have had a mountain to climb before with your line management role. There were lots of challenges, busy, long hours, lots of stuff to get involved in. And you had to support your team, so your team would be coming up behind you somewhere. And your job was, in this picture here, your job is to make sure you put the clamp-ons in the right place, you've got the right sort of rope, you've got the right equipment. But guess what? The weather suddenly changes when you're halfway up and you have to completely review what you've been doing. And often many of you will be hanging by a single rope. Or if any of you have ever been climbing like this and you're trying to get your fingers in and get a hold, that's kind of what some of us as line managers are feeling like now. And I think we've got to find a way of hanging on. So who is it around you that can support you? Going back to the lady I was talking about just now, my first question to her was, who do you have that can support you? What do you need from them? two absolutely crucial questions that you have to answer for yourself to build your confidence back up when this weather change has really made you look at this mountain in a very different way. Maybe you were at the beginning, you hadn't even started the mountain, and suddenly you can't climb it from that direction, you've got to go somewhere else. So our role as a line manager moving forward is not just operational. It's not just thinking about what do they need, let's set targets, let's get organised, let's make sure that people come in. You know, we need to make sure that we are providing them with emotional support and what we really could call pastoral care. A lot more of our time needs to be spent on looking after people, asking them questions, and I'm going to come along to how we do that next. Business coaching. I don't know how many of you, we'll find out in a minute how many of you use some sort of coaching. You don't have to be a coach. You don't have to know all the right answers and help people and advise people. Business coaching is just about asking questions. It's about helping other people and yourself think things through. How am I going to tackle this, and what am I actually going to do about it? Because as leaders in the past and as line managers, I think we have a tendency to tell people what to do and how to do it because it's a lot quicker. It's a very powerful tool, and I feel as a life coach, obviously, and a business coach internationally, that this is probably the best set of skills I've ever learned. You don't need to advise people, suggest things and help people out. I mean, that's a tendency that many of us have as managers, is to think, oh, I need to help my staff, I need to support them. Yes, you do, but you can do that much better by helping them help themselves, and that's done through simple questioning. So let's have a look at our third poll today. Which is the most difficult question for you to answer? First of all, what can you control in your job? What would you change if you could? And what would that mean for you? What barriers might you face? How might you work around those barriers? When will you do that? And what support do you need? Let's have a look. Okay, fair enough. What would you change if you could, and what would... Okay, that's quite a difficult question to answer. But you have to ask yourselves, can you not answer that question because you haven't taken or made the time to sit down and really think about it? Because as a line manager, you have now got the opportunity to stop and think about you and your team. Yes, there's jobs to be done. Yes, you've got targets still to hit there. Yes, you've got the operational stuff. But remember what I said about you being more of a supporter and providing that care for your staff. Sit down and have a think about, what is it that I could change? Let's go back to this. Where are we? There's no reason why you as an individual manager can't pick this lot up and talk to your staff about it and think, okay, well, what are we actually going to do? What can I change going forward? What barriers might you face? Again, that is a very difficult one. I'm surprised that isn't higher in a way, because most of the time we don't know what the barriers are going to be. Maybe we just haven't, again, taken the time to sit down and think about that. So that's very interesting. Okay, I'd be interested if you've got any further questions on that when we get to the Q&A session at the end. Thank you. So our coaching questions. Now, we've talked already, I asked you a series of questions just now on the poll, and those are questions that I would suggest as a takeaway from this, that you sit down and you actually ask yourselves, and you scribble down some ideas and some thoughts, and then go away and ask your staff exactly the same thing. And that is the really good starting point for moving forward and coaching. And you'll be familiar with the 6 starting questions that we use when we are coaching, open questions. Yes. What do you think about this? How would you approach it? Where do we start? Why are we doing this? There are many questions, and the key to it is keep it simple. Allow them plenty of time to think through what you're asking them. Don't rush them. Everybody's got to come up with their own thoughts and ideas. Everybody has got the resources inside them to answer these questions, but they might not just come all at one go. And by using coaching questions and spending more time asking than telling and changing that balance, is you will build their confidence. They'll feel much more comfortable. And that goes back to what I said earlier on about you're building commitment for the future with your teams. You're building that trust. You're allowing people to instead of going along on their wheels, you're allowing them to come to you, ask questions. You're going to reflect them back to them to make them think things through. They're going to have to get used to this change of you normally answering their questions and telling them. Okay, our final poll today. First of all, do you always use open questions with your team in all situations? So how many coaches out there have got that hat on? Do you only use them sometimes when you've got time or the patience? And do you use them rarely as you have to tell them what to do and monitor the people's output? Wow, that's a good split. Okay, so always using open questions and sometimes. This is great. When I ran this survey with people about 5 years ago, it was completely different. And I think we have, without realising, made quite a shift anyway as line managers, starting to go from telling people all the time just what to do and get on with it, to inviting people. And that's great. That 11%, that may well be a split between you've got new people in the organisation, or maybe you as a line manager are not confident enough to ask people, or maybe you just think it's quicker to tell them what to do and get on with it. But again, take this opportunity to stop and think about how much more could you use coaching questions, and what scenarios can you use them in? How many times can you get people more involved in what you're doing rather than you just being the decision maker? I think that's also really important. Okay. Plan your questions. One of the most important things about questioning and inviting people to answer is about planning your questions rather than just blurting out what you think sounds all right in your head. We all know that we go through our head what we're going to say, what are we going to ask. When we get there, something different comes out. So do try and plan your questions as much as possible, and putting yourself in their shoes. How might they answer? What might they be feeling at the moment? And the most important thing, of course, is about listening to them and learning from what they're saying. This is a whole learning process right from the very beginning when we started, and we're going to continue learning from it. And it's about collecting that stuff we learn. Perhaps we could bottle it. If we can bottle these lessons as we go along so that we can use them in the future, that would be even better. Now we come to something else that we're going to have to do. Maybe you've started already having to deliver these difficult messages. I'm very lucky that one of my clients I've been working with for a number of years is our National Health Service here in the UK, a certain area. And I have been running courses and doing coaching with them, focused on, one of the things is about delivering difficult messages. And that could be to patients, it could be to patients' families, it could be to members of staff. Never has this been so, more important than it really is right now. So I want to share some of the stuff that I've been doing with them, because I actually think that's really important. And one of the most important things that we've discovered is coming straight to the point. We need to deliver that message very clearly and straight to the point to tell people what's happening. Another company I was speaking to last week, one of the managers, he's a regional manager for the UK. It's a worldwide organisation. They've got 48,000 employees altogether. And he was told that he was going to have to take a third pay cut from now until the end of the year. Some of his team were also asked to do the same thing. Some of the team were below the threshold for doing that, and other people have been furloughed. So he is now in a position where he's been given this message and told, and you need to get on with it. What he's doing is thinking, right, I've got to give that message out, but what I also need to do is understand people's initial reaction to that, and I also need to find out how they feel about it, and I also then need to see what questions they might have and allow them time to absorb that information and to go away and talk to friends and family and come back and discuss it. It shouldn't just be an ultimatum. It's very difficult if you're line managing various people at various phases, or some are at work and some aren't at work. So just think about when you're having to give these messages across to people to just, how do I do it? You have no idea how people are going to behave. They actually don't know how to behave going forward, because it's a whole different ball game. I want to tell you a little bit about courage. And I mentioned to you already that I worked with the NHS, and a couple of years ago we ran a survey, which I've got the results of here, and the survey asked what was the main reason for not having what we decided to call a courageous conversation with people, because you kind of have to have the courage to have that conversation. It's not always easy. And it was an interesting result that came out. So 29% of people said they didn't want to create a bad atmosphere, so they thought best not to talk about it at the moment, leave it till tomorrow. 18% of people wanted to avoid confrontation. 16% of people didn't know actually how to say it. They didn't know how to put it across to those people. And then the rest of people, it was a mixture between, they were a bit worried about what the reprisals or the reaction might be. They didn't want to upset somebody. Or in some cases, it was, I never seem to get round to it, I haven't got the time. It's important that if we've got something to say and it's difficult, we need to sit down and plan it and then get on and do it. The other interesting statistic that came out of it was when people put off having these conversations, the results came back that 4% of them resolved themselves. Interesting. 43% of these situations and these conversations actually got worse. And this could be anything to do with poor performance, giving bad news, anything that falls into this, courageous conversation. 49, so the highest percentage of people said they actually stayed the same. So it didn't go away. Unfortunately, it was still there. So it had to be dealt with at some point. And then, lucky for some, I'm sure, 4% of people said that someone else had tackled it. So we've talked so far about where we've come from, where we are, your role as a line manager, and I've already mentioned the fact that we are starting to become more of supporters and providing a more pastoral role as line managers. So what does that mean? What do we actually have to do? Well, first of all, we have to realise that I mentioned about us having our resources inside us. We have collected skills, knowledge, experience, behaviours over the years. Some we know about, some we don't know about. They're tucked away inside. And so what we need to think about is, what are those skills that I've got? How can I pull those out and use them moving forward? Then I need to think about asking my staff the same thing. You've probably heard that different leaders pop up in different situations. And I think that this is quite interesting. I remember years and years ago when I was in retail, we had our leaders and we all decided we were going to go on a day out up to London to Hyde Park, and we were going to do an orienteering exercise. So we were all given a map and a compass, and most of us looked quite horrified and we didn't really know what to do with it. And then we found that there were one or two people that just quietly sat in the office normally, and they were the people that stepped forward and said, I've got experience in this, I know what I'm doing, and we all tended to follow them. So you may or may not have or think you've got those resources, dip down and find out what you have got. Going back to my lady in the office, one of the things that we've done with her this week is to say, what are all the things you're good at and you like doing? And that means outside of work as well. What are the things that you're not so good at and you don't really like doing? Yeah. And what sort of things do you feel are getting in the way of you moving forward? And do that with your staff. And what you'll find is that they've got things that you don't, and you've got things that they don't have. And so you can help people move forward by being more empathetic, by asking questions, by being supportive. And she now feels really confident in herself and her team. And they are now looking at ways of rebuilding not what they had, but rebuilding their whole scenario of how they move forward. And one of the things they've actually decided is they're not moving back into the massive great offices that they had in the first place because they don't really need it. So many things have come out of this. You may have come across Maya Angelou in your time. Great lady, unfortunately we lost her a few years ago, an authoress, women's rights, public speaker. And I remember listening to her once, and this really resonated with me. And that was about people will forget what you've said, and they might forget the way that you've said it, but they will never forget the way that you make them feel. That's the thing that really sticks with people. And your role now as a line manager is to make people feel good, make them feel confident so that they can get back in there and get on and do their jobs as much as they possibly can and in the best possible way. So what's our future as line managers? Well, what I'd like to leave with you really is a few things that we've talked about, something that you can take away with you. One of the most important things then is about being supportive. Understand yourself. What do you need? What do you need? And what can you give? Help your people. Think about what happens next, realistically. And if you don't know, the third one is ask questions. And that means ask questions, not just asking questions of your staff, but ask questions of your line managers and other people in the organisation to find out what's happening. And of course, a fourth thing, which is crucial as line managers, is listen. And even if you think you've been listening, listen more and learn from that and pull everybody back together. Maybe you can't do that physically, but let's just make sure that as line managers moving forward, we really can provide that support for them. That's our job. The percentages of what used to be operational stuff as managers and our helpful, supportive, pastoral stuff that we should spend time with our people, the balance has changed and we're now moving forward. So thank you very much for listening today. I hope I've given you a few things to think about and to take away with you. But the key thing is just take the time to sit down and focus on you and help to focus on your team. Thank you. Adina.
Thank you very much, Nicola. This was a fantastic session. You had me glued to the screen. I haven't actually moved an inch, listening to everything you had to say. And I think it's very similar to our audience as well, because I was monitoring the Q&A section and there are quite a few questions that have been posted through. Fantastic. So I will go through them and pass it on to you. So let's start with a question. It's an anonymous entity, so we don't know where is it coming from, but the question is, as a manager of a team in a different global locations, each team has a different culture, which reflects on how they will behave when they go back to work. How do I manage this phase and ensure that their manager, I am communicating and being supportive?
Okay. The key thing about managing globally and understanding different cultures, we've got the experience that from communicating with them before. Now what we need to do is go back to what I mentioned about asking questions. If you don't know how to manage them, ask them. Ask them how they would like to or need to be managed moving forward. You will get different answers because, of course, they're different cultures. But that will enable you to organise the way that you can then help them and support them. But it goes back to the questioning again. If you don't know, ask. That's always been my motto.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. There are a few other questions as well. Some of them will be similar, but I think that making that differentiating point will actually answer to our attendees what they were looking for. Okay. So there is a question saying, we are clearly operating from a different environment and will be for some foreseeable future. Mm-hmm. How much control does line manager have over interpersonal relationships where they're not together?
That's quite a difficult question to answer. You don't have control over it. I think one of the things that I need to say there is you have to relinquish that control. Everybody in this situation, everybody's had to take control of their own working life, how they do it, where they do it, who they're with. I think by setting up some sort of a structure that suits them, and again, go back to asking them what suits them best, is regular calls, regular conversations. But instead of just asking what they're doing, it's important to say, how do you feel about it? And what are your concerns? What are the things that are bothering you at the moment? Because those are the things that they're the glue, if you like. Think about when you're talking to your friends, you notice when something's different and they're not comfortable. So you say, what's going on? Are you okay? How can I help? How do you feel about that? And I think that's the best way to build those relationships, because it's going to have to take a slightly different angle than we've used before.
Right, okay, thank you. There is another question that talks about a model. Well, it's not a model, but it's what you've mentioned in your talk. How much time does a line manager need to allocate to a pastoral role?
I remember working for an American corporation many, many years ago, and we did quite a lot of research on this, both for ourselves and across the EMEA region, which was quite interesting because they came up with a statistic that of 20% of the time, you should be spending on a one-to-one basis supporting your people. Now, whether that's holding reviews, whether that's coaching and supporting, whether that's doing their induction. When we announced this, people were horrified. They said, I haven't got time to spend 20% with my people. I've got work to do. I've got my job to do. So I think they discovered after we monitored it for a number of months afterwards, and they realised that actually most people do spend, when you tot it up, not far off that 20%, and some people spend a lot more. And I think now that needs to be a lot more.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. We have another question that talks about what is the main change in line management responsibility in comparison then and now? So we're talking once upon a time before COVID-19 yes. And the current situation.
I think I remember. Okay, what's the main shift is people. We were very operational before, and this is not everybody, and this is not everyone in the world or every organisation, but on the whole, we've been very operational. We've got targets, we've got systems, we've got procedures, and everybody's got this very definite thing to stick by. Goes back to me talking about my ball of wool. But I think what's happened now is we need to focus much more on the people, and we need to make sure that everybody understands what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it, because it's the how that has grown, not we just need to do it. Why do we need to do it? How do we need to do it? How can we work together now to sort out whatever's coming next? Because we're all stepping into the unknown still, and I think we might be for a very long time. So stick with your people. That's the most important thing.
That's the key answer. Fantastic. We have a question from Scotland. Any advice on setting direction when, in the current environment, we don't know what the future holds? So setting direction as to when. So
yeah, I think we have in the past, again, we've got strategies. We've got, you know, most organisations have 3 and 5 year strategies. We have annual business goals, you know, all this operational stuff. I think the focus now, we need to shorten that timeline. I think what we need to do to keep people focused and motivated and on board, and I haven't mentioned motivation yet, but obviously that's vital. I think we need to shorten those timelines, and on a weekly, monthly, 3-monthly basis, even 3 months at the moment is a heck of a long time if you think how far we've come in such a short number of weeks. So focusing on keeping it short and keeping it so that people can focus on that end line, that first end line, not see it as a fog in the distance that they're not really sure what's happening.
Right, okay, thank you for that. There's another question. Do you think that the relationship between team and line managers will improve as a result of COVID-19 pandemic?
I would love to say yes. I think it's built on how much those line managers, or you as line managers, are building that relationship now. You're not seeing people face to face, and it's quite difficult to start with to just chat to people. It suits some people just to face to face or on the phone, but I do think that we should now take this opportunity to be building those relationships. And yes, we have a great opportunity to have a stronger, more committed, more productive team going forward. There's no reason, there's nothing that will get in the way of us as line managers making that happen.
Right, okay, thank you. There's also a question here that somebody has asked and actually underlined certain things, that considering the current situation or current uncertainty, and that is repeated, considering the current uncertainty, should I be telling my people what to do and take control and responsibility rather than pass the responsibility on to them?
Okay.
So I suppose it links to the coaching style.
Yeah, my immediate thing is that words that jump out at me there are telling and controlling, and I think those are two things that we need to stop doing. Not entirely, there's always a place and a time that we need to do that. And it's not about passing control to anybody. What it is, it's about pulling them in and involving them. So, you know, we're going to be moving forward in this current situation. It's important that we ask people what they think, what they feel, what do you think we should do? Yes, as a line manager, you have the ultimate decision to make, but by telling people and controlling, you will alienate them. And going back to the last question, that will break down any barriers, because you're not in the same room, you can't discuss it properly, you haven't got that, you can't read the body language and take it in that way. So I think it's really important that you step back and involve people and pull them in with you, not try and control them or pass the buck.
As it does, yes. Talking about different mediums, there is a question also saying, as a line manager that manages my team virtually using Zoom, email, WhatsApp, and all sorts of different mediums, can I use the same approach to manage the expectation of my line manager?
Oh. Yes, I don't see any reason why not. I think one of the things about expectation is we often, as line managers, I have to say that we often tell people in our team what we expect. And sometimes we're not exactly sure ourselves, but that's where we stick to the rules again. But many years ago, I learned from a director that I was working with, and we were in a new project team. And the first thing that he said was, okay, what do you all expect from me? And we were we were expecting it to be the other way around. And it was great because we started to think about how could he help us? what did we expect from him, and not just the other way around. And so it's much easier for us then to be able to work more effectively and openly and trust each other, because you know that. So it's a two-way street.
Two-way code indeed. Yes, yes, that's right. Thank you for that. There is another question. As a line manager in a current situation, I feel quite alone at times. So how do I get support when I feel that communication, which when you are at the office is quick and you see people face to face, now it's quite slow and usually incomplete?
Yeah, because we're all in our little pods, as I call them, and we're doing things at our time of day when it suits us, unless we've got conference calls or webinars or whatever going on. I think that one of the most important things is, again, to ask is how, if I'm at home and I'm feeling lonely and I think all I want to do is go and meet up with everybody, have a coffee, have a chat, I've got these things going on in my head and I need to talk about them, or I'm not sure how to approach this part of work. It's going back to asking, and don't be frightened to reach out for that support and to say, okay, I'm struggling a little bit here. Can we chat this afternoon? And, say that you need the time to talk. Don't slot me in for 10 minutes. And I think that's where we need to communicate much more effectively to other people. And that goes back to expectations. If they expect only to talk to us for 10 minutes because they don't see it as being important, it's up to us to push that to them and say, no, I need your time. I need that support at the moment.
Right, okay. There is also another question. We are now running out of time, I'm afraid. But I will try to squeeze another question in. In the resistance phrase of your model, what things I will notice when someone is resisting, as if they are working from home, especially in the current situation? How do they know they're resisting? What are the signs?
Generally, when people are resisting, they are saying, I don't agree with that. No, that's not my job. I don't remember us talking about that. So it goes back to almost, I'm sure everyone's heard of the fight-flight scenario. And that's really what they're doing. They're sort of trying to protect themselves because they don't want to accept what the situation is. I think most of us have come through that resistance now, certainly to the beginning of the COVID-19 situation. I do think that will happen again when we start to have to go back into work. And I've already seen it happening with some of my clients and in organisations where people have been told they've got to go back in, and they're resisting that because emotionally they can't work out what that's going to mean for them and what's the impact that that's also going to have on their families again. So those are the things to look out for. People will very obviously in the denial phase be angry and frustrated, but when the resistance comes, they'll be like quieter, maybe a bit down in the dumps, maybe you hear from them less, maybe they're the other end of the scale and they're saying, no, this is not going to work, I don't like this idea. So just watch out for some of the telltale signs that you don't normally see in their behaviour and their personality.
Right, so spotting is very important. Nicola, thank you very much. This hour has been absolutely fantastic. The time has flown away, and I very much enjoyed hosting this with you. I'm sure on behalf of our attendees, I will also like to say thank you to you. And with this, I will close this webinar, just reminding our attendees that the recording of this webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel, as well as our website, www.lmcuk.com. So please do visit. We will send you an email with a link to that, so you will be able to watch it. Please do remember to like it, share it, and invite others as well to have a look at it. Please do watch out also for the next coming webinars that LMC will be hosting, and we look forward to welcoming you to one of those. Thank you very much. Lovely day.